I was riding down one of those long country back roads when I found myself reflecting on the past few months. It had been a rough year. I had lost my job. I had ended a long-time relationship, and I was just going through a lot of changes. My one silver lining was sitting in the back seat singing along to our favorite CD, Kanye West's 808s and Heartbreak. In that moment, I was in my happiest of places. I was put on this earth to be a dad. And the one thing that would for sure remain constant was the relationship I had with my son. So as we pulled up to his grandmother's house to say goodbye for the weekend, I walked in the house, I set his bags down, and I told her, "I'll see y'all Sunday." She said, "Okay." I kissed him on the top of the head and I told him, "It'll only be 2 days." We did our secret handshake and I walked out the door. Sunday came around and this was the first time I felt something was off. I called his grandma and I told her I was on the way to come get him. And she said, "He's not here. He was gone with his cousins, but as soon as they got back, she would call me." I thought this was weird. I was about an hour and a half away. And I thought to myself, why couldn't she just call them? Tell them to bring him home. His dad was on the way to come get him. But this was still at a time where not everyone had cell phones. So I said, "Yes, ma'am. Just call me when he gets back." The day went on and I still hadn't heard from him. So I called her again. I said, "I wanted to come get him before it got too late." And she said, "I don't know where they're at. They should have been back. But as soon as they get back, I will call you." Frustration growing, but not wanting to stir the pot. I said, "Yes, ma'am," while thinking that she had absolutely no consideration for how late I'd be on that road. While waiting on her to call, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I answered and it was his mom. And the first thing she said was, "Eldon, he's here." I said, "You're home?" She said, "No, he's here." I said, "Where?" And she said, "London, with me." I said, "What?" She said it again. She said, "He's here in London with me." Her mom, and her best friend had colluded to get my son on a plane and to London without me knowing. In that moment, I felt like I had literally lost everything. With the vitriol I unleashed, I wanted to burn every bridge she and I could ever cross. This was a level of disrespect I didn't know existed. I didn't deserve this. I was fully committed to my role as a father, and I didn't even get a seat at the table. I called an attorney, and they told me pretty much what I had already knew, that in the state of Georgia, if you weren't married, then you had no rights to the child, and she could do whatever she wanted to do. His only advice was, if you want to see your son, I wouldn't piss her off. I could still smell the smoke. It was 2 years before she and I even talked again. And because he was 6 years old, she would make the phone calls, but when I answered, he was always on the phone. I tried to keep it positive. I asked him, was he having fun? I told him to be a good boy for his mom. I told him I loved him, but I never told him I missed him. I didn't want to put that kind of weight on his heart. It would be 2.5 years before I saw my son. And the first time he came home when he got off that plane, now he was almost 9. And those 2 years felt like 10. he had changed so much physically. And I knew his young mind was changing as well. But the one thing I hoped that had remained was the bond we had. So when I went for that handshake and he met me in return and it was solid, I knew then, no matter space, time, or circumstance, the bond between a father and son could never be broken. Thank you.